Have you ever treated yourself to something a little special? Maybe a designer wallet or a name brand pair of sneakers?
Oh, sure.
That feeling when you own it, right? And the assumptions that kind of come with the price tag, that little maiden label,
Hmm.
feels pretty significant.
It really can, yeah.
Well, that feeling and, the reality perhaps behind it, that's what we're really digging into today.
Exactly. There's been a real buzz online lately. A lot of conversations questioning where our luxury goods actually come from and what they truly cost to make.
Right.
It seems like the way this information is being shared is changing, like really rapidly.
Yeah.
And some long-held ideas are being challenged.
Absolutely. We've been looking at some fascinating stuff, particularly this viral YouTube transcript. It's just packed with personal stories, observations about what's going on online.
Hmm.
And it's making some pretty bold claims, about the manufacturing origins and the real costs of those brands we all recognize: Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Chanel, Prada, Fendi, you name it.
Yeah, the big ones. And our goal with this deep dive is, well, to unpack those claims. We want to understand what's driving this increased transparency or maybe alleged transparency
Your point, alleged.
and figure out what it all means for how we see and maybe buy these kinds of items. So where should we start?
Let's start with what the YouTube video calls the maiden illusion. I mean, the core assertion is that many of these huge luxury names, think Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Chanel, Prada, Fendi, like the whole high-end crew,
Mm-hmm.
are actually manufactured primarily in China. The claim is the final steps, maybe just sticking on a label, might happen in Europe, Italy, France, somewhere like that.
Right. And that supposedly allows them to slap a made in Italy tag on the product.
Exactly.
And what's really striking is some of the anecdotal evidence shared. Like the YouTuber talks about finding Gucci shoes they bought for, what, $1,700?
That's a 1700.
Finding them online in China for just under $10.
$10. It's unbelievable.
And then there were Gucci slides bought for $450,
Yeah.
allegedly found online for around $160.
Okay, still a big jump, but less extreme.
But then another pair, Gucci slides, costing $400 retail, were claimed to have a production cost of only 75 cents.
75 cents. Okay, that really makes you raise an eyebrow.
It certainly gets your attention.
And this isn't just one person's experience, apparently. The video also points to this trend on TikTok. Chinese manufacturers, even individuals, seemingly showing the alleged real origins, the production costs.
Yeah, like pulling back the curtain. It's like this wave of supposed insider info hitting the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And the suggestion that only the designer tag might be added in Italy. That's quite a statement, isn't it?
It really is.
It points to this potential strategy where, like, a tiny bit of final processing in Europe lets brands cash in on the prestige of those labels.
Even if, the bulk of the work happens somewhere else entirely.
Right. And just to add a bit of context, I mean, generally the country of origin for labeling, it's often decided by where the last substantial transformation of the product happens.
Substantial transformation. Okay.
So if the final assembly or some key finishing process is done in Italy, that could legally justify the Made in Italy tag, even if most components came from China or elsewhere.
Gotcha. Okay, so that leads into the second key claim then, which is this huge difference between the alleged manufacturing costs and the retail prices, the markups.
Yeah, the source material really hammers this point, suggesting things like maybe $30 to make shoes that sell for $700,
Wow.
or like $10 to produce a hoodie that goes for $300 plus.
Okay.
And even jeans, maybe $50 to make with a $500 to $1,000 price tag. I mean, these are substantial differences we're talking about.
They really are.
But what's really important to consider here, I think, is the argument that when you buy luxury, you're often not just paying for the physical thing itself.
Right. The source says you're buying the story.
Exactly. The brand's history, its image, the lifestyle it can
The
project.
feeling, yeah. Status, confidence, identity even.
That's it. And these brands pour huge amounts of money into building that story.
Millions, yeah. The ads, the curated image, the celebrity endorsements, it all builds up that emotional connection.
And that perceived value, which then lets them command those high prices.
So the claim is it's not necessarily about like super high quality materials or amazing craftsmanship at the start of the process.
Well, not primarily, perhaps. The argument is that a big chunk of the price reflects the brand value itself, the prestige, the emotional pull it has.
So branding and marketing are doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the price tag.
That's the idea, yeah. The perceived value is heavily shaped by all that.
Now, it feels like this whole conversation has really blown up recently, and our sources are hinting it might be connected to some pretty big global stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the third claim. The role of trade wars, maybe shifts in regulations. The U.S.-China trade war keeps coming up.
That's a really interesting angle. The suggestion is that Chinese manufacturers might be, let's say, more willing now to reveal where these goods are actually being made.
Like as a response to tariffs.
Potentially, yeah. Almost like a form of pushback, maybe. A way of saying, hey, look where the real production happens.
Huh. And there's also this claim, and this sounds pretty major, that China might have relaxed its regulations around counterfeiting as part of this whole dynamic.
Yeah, that's a significant assertion. If true, it suggests a potential policy shift that could really shake up the global luxury market.
How so?
Well, if that were the case, it could help explain why we're seeing more of these Chinese manufacturers apparently offering goods directly to consumers.
Bypassing the brands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes without branding, sometimes maybe similar designs, and at much, much lower prices, using platforms like TikTok or 1688, Taobao.
Okay, for people who don't know, 1688 and Taobao are like huge online wholesale and retail sites in China.
Massive, yeah.
Ah.
So they're using these channels to reach customers globally, cutting out the middleman, the luxury houses.
And it's funny, the source points out that TikTok itself isn't really easily available in China.
Right. Which makes it even more notable that these videos exposing brands or offering alternatives are reaching Western audiences.
This suggests a deliberate effort, maybe.
It could, yeah. It's interesting. And the source even names specific TikTok accounts, like Sinbags or Luna Sourcing China.
Right, I saw those. Examples of this phenomenon, supposedly exposing brands and distributors, but also offering direct access to similar stuff.
It adds a layer of specifics to these broader claims, you
Yeah.
know, makes it feel more concrete.
It's almost like a whole new direct pipeline for consumers to potentially get these goods, or at least very similar goods.
Potentially, yeah.
And speaking of specifics, the YouTube transcript you looked at, wow, it lists a ton of brands allegedly made mostly in China. It's a really wide range.
It really is. You've got the high fashion houses, Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Chanel, Prada, Fendi,
The usual suspects.
then major sportswear like Adidas, Nike, but also Dior, Lululemon, Burberry, Armani, Dolce & Gabbana, Michael Kors, Ralph Lauren,
Yeah.
even Apple is mentioned.
Okay.
The list just keeps going. Coach, Calvin Klein, Celine, Zara, Acne Studio, The North Face, Rimowa Luggage, Levi's, Victoria's Secret, Puma, Uniqlo, Disney, Max Mara.
Evenly, YSL. And there were a couple that look like typos, maybe Cadillac and Ferragamo.
Yeah, possibly typos like Pergamo for Ferragamo, but still, it covers such a broad spectrum. Luxury, consumer goods, tech.
It's kind of staggering, and the source even drills down on Zara's supply chain in China, naming specific companies that allegedly supply sweaters, puffer jackets, nightgowns, trousers.
Shoes, belts, jewelry, hair accessories.
Yeah.
It's like getting a peek behind the curtain of the whole global fashion machine.
That level of detail definitely makes you pause. It lends a bit more, I guess, weight to the claims about widespread manufacturing in China.
For sure. And just mentioning a Zara supplier in China isn't shocking in itself. We know fast fashion sources globally. But seeing it listed alongside all these luxury names,
It paints a picture of just how globalized these supply chains really are. And then there's that intriguing point about the Birkin bag, the ultimate symbol of luxury exclusivity.
right, the waiting lists, the price tag,
The source suggests that maybe even very wealthy people are finding ways to get similar items directly from manufacturers in China, bypassing the whole Hermes boutique experience.
that really challenges the whole notion of exclusivity, doesn't it?
Totally.
Okay.
What does it even mean if you can get something almost identical, potentially from the same place, just without the official channel?
It certainly raises big questions about what truly constitutes that value. Is it the brand name, the controlled scarcity, or the actual product itself, if even the richest are looking for alternatives?
It suggests maybe a growing awareness of this potential disconnect between the price and the actual production cost.
Could be. So how are people reacting to all this stuff coming out?
Well, the YouTuber and our main source definitely felt kind of finessed, I think was the word used.
Yeah, I could see that.
Said it's making them totally rethink past luxury buys. There's this feeling like, wow, we've been kind of blind to this.
That sense of being misled is understandable, right? If you believe you're paying top dollar for European craftsmanship and origin,
And then you hear maybe it's mostly made elsewhere.
it can definitely lead to disappointment.
Or anger, even.
The idea that maybe you were primarily buying status, not necessarily quality linked to that specific origin, that really comes through.
Yeah. And there's this other feeling, too, that this transparency, if that's what it is, could be kind of empowering.
How so?
Like shifting power, giving consumers more knowledge about where stuff comes from, maybe leveling the playing field a bit.
Interesting take. But the source also mentions the flip side, right? Negative reactions. People feeling angry at the brands, calling it deceptive.
Or at least not very transparent about their manufacturing. Those huge price gaps really fuel that feeling, I imagine.
Definitely. But it's not entirely straightforward, is it? The counter-argument pops up too.
You mean about China's motives?
Exactly. That maybe this isn't just about transparency or helping consumers. There's the suggestion it could be, strategic. A way to gain market share during these ongoing trade issues by encouraging more direct buying.
Ah, like a geopolitical move disguised as consumer info.
It's a really important angle to consider. Geopolitics could absolutely be a factor here. Any policy shifts or encouragement of direct sales could be seen as giving them an edge in the current global economy.
And there's a more serious point raised, too, about the human cost sometimes tied to making designer stuff.
Right. And whether that value proposition still makes sense if these luxury items are primarily made cheaply in China, it makes you think beyond just the price tag.
Yeah, the broader implications, global supply chains, ethics, it gets complicated fast.
It really does. And that suggestion to just knowingly buy fake items instead of overpriced branded ones, that's certainly a provocative response.
Definitely throws a spanner in the works. And then, like a real-time reaction, the source mentioned live streams getting banned. The ones selling luxury goods direct from China.
Yeah, that was noted. It seems like there's some pushback happening, or maybe an attempt to control this direct flow of goods that could really disrupt things.
Interesting. Could be the established brands reacting, trying to protect their turf or their image.
It's definitely a possibility, trying to manage the narrative and their distribution in the face of this potential shift.
So, okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things we should really take away from all these claims and counterclaims?
Well, I think the key takeaways are these strong claims circulating online, backed by anecdotes, seeming trends that a lot of big-name luxury brands across different sectors are primarily made in China.
Despite often having those made in Europe labels.
Right, allegedly due to minimal final processing there. Then there's the huge alleged gap between production costs and retail prices.
With the argument that we're mostly paying for the brand story, the status, the marketing magic.
Exactly. Not solely for, say, superior materials or the origin of the main manufacturing process.
And we also touched on how global politics, like the U.S.-China trade situation, might be playing a role in bringing all this to light.
Potentially, yeah, with suggestions of manufacturers exposing brands, maybe shifts in regulations.
Right.
And fundamentally, I think it all boils down to a big question for everyone listening. When you buy a luxury item, what are you really paying for? What's the core value you're seeking?
Is it where it was mostly made? Is it the specific materials? Is it the artistry throughout the whole process?
Or is it mostly about that brand name, the story, the status it confers?
It definitely makes you think twice, doesn't it? What does this information spark for you thinking about your own shopping habits? Does hearing all this change how you might look at your next big purchase?
And that really leads us to our final thought to chew on. Could this increased transparency we're seeing, or at least the claims of transparency, fundamentally change the whole luxury market?
Will people start valuing things differently now?
Or will that long-standing allure of the brand name, the status symbol, ultimately win out, regardless of where it was mostly made or what it actually cost to produce?
It also makes you think more broadly, doesn't it, about our incredibly interconnected global supply chains and these constantly shifting dynamics of international trade. Lots to consider.